All right. Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to kick off the first webinar in the Careers in Green Chemistry seminar series. It's sponsored by the Center for Integrated Catalysis. So the goal of this series and these seminars as a whole is to bring in speakers from a wide variety of different careers and different career paths, all linked through green chemistry and sustainability. And so we hope that graduate students in chemistry, other STEM related fields find this as like a useful tool to identify possible jobs after graduation, or sectors or fields that they want to go into, and just use this as a way of showcasing what is out there after we graduate. And so it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the series, Frank Cassou.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't rehearse that. Yes.
Yeah, I forgot to ask you. But Frank is an entrepreneurial leader with over 30 years of experience working with technology companies and capital firms to support those companies. So currently he's the CEO and co-founder of a company called Cyclopure. Cyclopure is a company that takes a sustainable approach to helping tackle the problem of water purification. And so today, Frank will tell us a little bit about that. So I'd like to welcome Frank to share a story with us.
Super. Thank you, Ben. And thank you guys for organizing this. Remind me how long we have here, just so I can kind of pace. Is it about 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? No.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I prepared I did something a little different today because Ben asked me to talk a little bit about background and kind of my path to, working at Cyclopure. So I've thrown a few slides in. I'll go through that. I think I'm going to pause at a couple, rather than just kind of run you through, 45 minutes of like, I'm going to kind of break at a couple points because there are kind of discrete sections, and don't want to go too crazy. Maybe Ben and his colleagues can moderate, but I think we could just, there's logical points where after 45 minutes, people might forget some of the questions. So let me get started. Okay, let's see if I can do this. So can you, Ben, you want to give me a thumbs up? Can you see it? Okay, all right, super. Well, thanks again for inviting me. I guess since I'm the first speaker, I can guarantee that I'll be the best speaker that you've heard so far this year in the programs. What I'm going to do is just, like I mentioned, I'm going to go through my background a little bit, how I kind of, like anybody, it wasn't a straight path to where I am today. Lots of different experiences that kind of led me where I am. All those experiences cumulatively kind of have made me someone with, I think, a diverse background that kind of helps look at things through multiple lenses. So I always encourage that. There's just no one way or one experience that's going to make you, great at an occupation. It's really just paying attention and absorbing all the activities that you get involved with. So Ben asked me kind of what led me to a couple questions here, what led me to environmental sustainability. And, so I was thinking about it. It was, so my life in tech really started with snails. And how is that? So when I was very young, just, crawling around in our garden in Marin County growing up, I was with my mom and she was tending the garden, and I went over and happened to chomp on a cake of snail poison, and they had to rush me to the hospital and pump out my stomach. And so ever since then, I've kind of been an environmentalist, just so, from a wee tyke, just against pesticides and things like that, as they kind of led me to a quick short visit to the hospital. As I say, I grew up, kind of in a green activity. I grew up in Marin County, and this was the 70s, and we had an environmental education program. You can see me over here in high school. We're out on some, I spent a whole semester with a group of students together, and we were looking at different environmental activities, the geothermal plant. We got involved in this huge activity to transplant pickleweed from one portion of the other of the San Francisco Bay to make room. They were bringing in a ferry terminal, which was going to kind of destroy the pickleweed population there, just its growth. And so, and then of course, Grateful Dead. But, you know, I kind of put it over here, DNA coding. So, you know, whereas I didn't go straight into environmental activities or science or anything like that, you know, it gets in your kind of bloodstream, just this sensitivity and this awareness. And so, but my own path has been really, you know, all over the place. So, you know, I went to Berkeley, went on to law school. It was kind of a tough choice because there was so many things to do. But I went to law school, and I was lucky because after graduating from law school, I went to Silicon Valley right away and got to start working with really exciting technology companies. And so you can see some of the names. I spent most of my early years working in biotech. And so worked with, you know, Genentech, Amgen, Gilead Sciences early on in the Bay Area. Really got to participate a lot in product development, licensing deals. As a result, you gotta get to know the chemistry and what they're doing. And we launched a couple products, I say we, but through those companies. And I really got to see the process of, you know, kind of doing the developmental work on something that's important, transformational, and then how it goes through the commercialization process. You get the scale up and produce it, and making pharmaceuticals was extremely complicated because they had so many levels of purification, and then the supply chain. So all of those were good experiences. I then moved down to San Diego to help with the launch of Qualcomm, which is a wireless technology company, which was, again, I was really fortunate to work with some really extraordinary people. Again, transformational in that it kind of ushered the way to digital wireless communications from analog. Most of you are probably too young, but in the early days, cellular communications was analog and it was hissy, and of course you couldn't, you know, move digits back and forth. So Qualcomm was really the company that ushered that in. And so again, got to see this process of developing technology, all the steps to securing the supply chain, validating it with customers. And so again, a good experience here. I got to work with Allergan, which was kind of fun. I was assisting them on this deal where they were out licensing some technology to a company, and they were really wanted me to be super careful about retaining rights to it. So it was a narrow out license, and it turned out, you know, at the time the technology was like botulism this or something. It turned out to be Botox, and I was like, afterwards, I'm just like so glad that I didn't mess up the licensing rights there. Then I moved to New York, and I worked with a wireless company called Nextwave Wireless for about 13 years, and spent a lot of time in DC too, because we had a lot of issues trying to get into the market and work with the FCC. And so I learned a lot about, you know, fighting with incumbents and, you know, regulatory affairs. So all these things kind of have contributed to, you know, my, you know, experiences and skill sets and ability to kind of manage a technology through development to commercialization. I left private practice, by the way, in 1996. So I've been an entrepreneur for 25 years. So here, startups start in all kinds of crazy ways: garages, bars, dorm rooms. In the case of Cyclopure, I met with my co-founder, Will Dichtel, at a storage room in Lewis Hall at UC Berkeley. Will had just published a paper in Nature on cyclodextrin absorbance used for water treatment. And it was a very kind of exciting technology that was using renewable materials. And we had gotten introduced to each other through a mutual friend. And so that kind of was the inception. When you start a company, you know, it's always easier to kind of think about starting a company than actually doing it. If you're really looking to, you know, it's kind of one thing if you want to set up a lemonade stand, but if you really want to build, you know, a business that is important and scalable and can recruit people and recruit money, you have to be, you know, have a good vision, and, you know, you have to have good technology, you have to have a market application. And so we had all of those ingredients with Cyclopure. There was kind of a convergence where, you know, drinking water is obviously hugely important to healthy economies and communities. And with growing populations and the intersection of economic activity, you kind of have this thing of, you know, we've got to make sure that we're, you know, treating the water that we use in a way that can be reused. And then we've got growing populations. So it really created an urgency to have methods that can purify water. And at the time, people were just learning, you know, about 10, 15 years ago, learning about micropollutants, which are really a, you know, part per billion, part per trillion concentrations that were continuing, you know, kind of unremoved, untreated in drinking water supplies. So they were just kind of they just kept passing around in the water cycle and building up each round. And then obviously, you know, coming into human contact as well through drinking. And so that was really our niche. We had, you know, a exciting renewable technology that was really ideally suited to removing trace contaminants. The thing about these two that was exciting to me was just the scale of everything, you know, how, you know, kind of tackling this problem that is really invisible to the eye, escaping current methods and systems. And so, you know, I always love playing around with, you know, kind of, you know, analogies for visualization. And, you know, first off, you know, when we talk about these small concentrations of, you know, 5 ppt, 10 ppt, you know, 1.5 ppt, part per trillion, is equal to 1 drop in the Lincoln reflecting pool. So you just get a sense of kind of what you're after. And, you know, the other thing is I can't remember how I did this analogy, but I did do it at one point where the equivalent of, you know, with your naked eye trying to see a micropollutant, you know, given how tiny they are, is just kind of like trying to see an ant on a picnic table from the International Space Station. So it's really, you've got all these challenges of detection to measure performance, and then you've obviously got to have something that can operate at that scale. So, so we at Cyclopure do it with Dexor, is what we call it. It's based on, our technology is based on a renewable material called beta-cyclodextrin, which is derived, as you can see here, from corn. And one of the things, so it's a readily available feedstock for polymerization in its native state. It is soluble, so if you dropped it in water, it just dissolves. But through cross-linking, we were able to make it a insoluble material available for water treatment. And what is so cool about cyclodextrins is they're very tiny. So across here is 0.78 nanometers, so less than a nanometer. And they have a hydrophobic cavity that is perfectly suited to drawing in organic compounds from water, and with great effectiveness. And so by virtue of this cross-linking, we were able to create, you know, this absorbent, and you can see it over here. This is 1 gram, and in a gram, you've got 320 quintillion cups that are at work. And so you can think about it, if you've got a packed bed or something that's, you know, literally got kilograms of this, how many of these cups are at work. The great thing that I'll show in a bit is, you know, they're all uniform size. So it makes them much more effective in, you know, kinetics, uptake, and capacity as well, compared to some other methods. One of the things that is unique about it, again, I mentioned that they have uniform cup sizes that are less than a nanometer. So one of the leading competitive medias is activated carbon, which is, generally made from burning coconut shells and then activating it. The thing about it is you kind of get what you burn. So you get uneven pore sizes, large, medium, small. And so it's non-selective and subject to fouling. So you can get large, molecule constituents like natural organic matter, medium, and then, so there's some crowding out of the micropollutants. So you can just imagine that it's less efficient in its uptake. And then also in terms of its capacity, you just have to use more. Whereas, with Dexor, we've just got all these tiny chairs that are just available for tiny micropollutants. And it's kind of that best of all worlds where the larger constituents, are blocked from coming in. So I'm going to go through a little bit here before I really dive into the company, just to talk about formation of a company. As I mentioned up front, you have to be really clear about, what your mission is and your purpose, and, how you're bringing something that is solving an important problem that is unique compared to other things in the market. And those are the ways that, you're going to be able to energize other people to come on board with you, whether they be, employees or investors or just people that are collaborators, scientific research, groups, or, government agencies. One of the keys is, it's kind of trite to say team, but it really is everything. You've got to, just the energy of your colleagues and that they bring every day, and excitement of working together and getting along and wanting to work for a common purpose is super, super important. And, you have to work at that. You have to create events, you have to do things, you have to, make sure that everybody feels that involvement and engagement. And then you got to have a sense of humor. And, you can see here we got, Bernie, who comes in and sits under our Chemist Crossing sign from time to time as well. But team is really an important thing. As I mentioned here, you got to celebrate everything. Here's we celebrated a big fundraising in 2019 with a person I worked with at Qualcomm, Erwin Jacobs. And we celebrated over here, really, this is our first shipment of a product, water test kits. And then down here is, we just put this out the other day for International Women's Day. And these are all our wonderful women that, work in areas of chemistry, of engineering, marketing, administration. So I just love the kind of, integrated, inclusive group that we have, and it just makes us, stronger and, just kind of better balanced. And I say here, every day is a milestone. So it's truly, you've just got to keep working at it. One of the things that I won't spend too much time here is, but, just to avoid like the kids' soccer game where everybody's rushing to the ball and you have chaos, you have to have a lot of clarity around, rules and, how they all work together to advance your goals and objectives. And, you have to be disciplined about your timeline and how you see, achieving your milestones. We've been at this 5 years, so, obviously you have to have patience as you go along. As I mentioned, it's really key to have, especially in the sciences, proprietary technology, because there's too many large companies that could come in and just overwhelm you. They will run you, they will chase you down if you don't have proprietary IP. So that is something that we invested heavily in as we formed the company. You also have to be pretty clear about your business model and, think about, who are your target markets? What's the best way to get there? You don't want to reinvent the wheel to where there are channels and supply chains already in existence. And so you want to find that happy medium. And this is really where I learned a lot from the biotech companies in Qualcomm that were, heavily using OEM relationships and others. So at Cyclopure, we, decided to really work with third parties in helping us get the material out to large drinking water applications. And then as that is a longer lead time activity, we said that we would bring, something that we can control, consumer products to market, such as a water test kits. I'll talk about that, and some home filter cartridges. So you have to be clear about your business model so that you are being the most efficient and utilizing resources that are already out there. Commercialization itself, we'll break down some of this, but, really as a process of, moving the concept along to a place where people can, tangibly see it, evaluate it. Evaluation has all kinds of activities, in terms of producing results that people can see, and then field trials and pilots, and that's sufficient to get people to invest in partnerships and commercial activities. And so you have a lot of gates and steps that you have to go through as you build a company and build alliances and create confidence in the market in your product. Okay, so I'm going to pause there for a second because I've gone a little bit about myself, formation of Cyclopure, and then also just kind of some of the basics of company formation. So, and if there's no questions, I can just keep marching on too, Ben. So
I can ask a question.
Yes.
So I guess, you talked about the other companies that you've worked at, but how does Cyclopure compare to working at those? I know it's completely different technology versus telecom, but
yeah, it's a really good question. I would say one thing is that's been different with Cyclopure is all the other companies had others that had founded them and started them and really raised the resources. So I kind of came in as a person to, help in the boat. Whereas Cyclopure, we, literally started from a paper. So, everything that exists today, from people to money to labs to, was just a, complete greenfield effort. So that was different. And I have to say, extremely rewarding to kind of take all those other learned experiences and apply them here. But really, there's so many things about technology development that, apply across, whether it's biotech, whether it's, they were different types of, obviously, pharmaceuticals at each of these companies in Qualcomm, where, you've got to basically go through a whole process of R&D and experimentation. And all of those disciplines are the ones that you guys know in terms of, experimentation, optimization, validation, repeatability. And that, is a huge front end effort. And so it's really been the same here as there. I would say that we're probably closer to some of the biotech ones in terms of, creating, reactions to make our material. And then the activities of purification and, kind of getting it ready. Then, Qualcomm was, much more of a semiconductor activity of, really developing all of the, algorithms and things like that, and then shrinking them down so that they could, be included in a phone. So, but there is that front end piece that is, all about, science and, experimentation and development, trial and error. And then after you get through that, then the establishment of business relationships isn't too different either, though.
thank you.
I have a question if I could ask that. So when you were starting Cyclopure and you had this product that was effective in filtering out nanopollutants, right? And obviously no one wants to be drinking that, but what was sort of the driving force? Like where did you have an idea when you were forming this company of who your primary customers would be? How did you know this would be economically viable? Like, was it restricted for, or did water companies need to have like a certain threshold of like purity that they weren't hitting, or what?
Yeah, all good questions. So the thing that we knew is that, as I mentioned, micropollutants were present in different water supplies in low concentration and really just recirculating, right? So they were coming out of wastewater effluent, they were coming out of industrial effluent, going into surface waters and groundwaters, and then coming back around to drinking water treatment plants, and just, kept circulating. So we knew there was a need to have a technology to do that. Existing technologies, which I'll get into in a second, either were ineffective or highly expensive. And so there was an opportunity. But then, so we felt like we had something that was renewably based, ideally suited in terms of its size, had, demonstrated lab excellence. But then you have the long road of commercialization ahead. But I guess the last part is, we really, when we first started, wanted to have this as something that would be able to be used, on large scale. And if you think about it, really just every place where, micropollutants either are being discharged or whether they're, coming in an influent way. So, there's lots of places that, we were looking at, distributing the material.
I have
I
a
also had a
question.
question. Oh, go ahead.
With such a small team, how did you go about making sure that you had all the skill sets you needed to solve these types of problems? Like, how do you approach that?
Yeah, well, maybe because now we're kind of getting into, these are really great questions. Maybe we just kind of pour in here, because I've got, this slide here kind of goes into that. So maybe you looked ahead, but I'll hit that one in just a minute. Should we
I was
just
just going to ask about the water testing kit, like how the business decision from water filtration to testing went, and also kind of interested about the technological part of it, if you can say anything about how it reports.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just dig into like the next 30 slides. So I think we're ready to, the others were kind of conceptual, just setting things up, but let's just go into it. So, today, we have two, and I'm going to kind of start with the conclusion and then work through how we got here. But today we have two different formulations of Dexor that we are able to synthesize and make available. One is called Dexor, which is a slightly negatively charged material. It's really good for things like pharmaceutical residues, pesticides. But one of the major water concerns, and this goes to the question of, kind of how do you, where did you kind of develop your focus? PFAS, or perfluorinated compounds that are present throughout the environment and water supplies, was an area, which I'll get into it a little bit here, that really didn't have a solution, was, an urgent crisis. Water supplies were being shut down in different towns. But our original formulation did not do well against it. So it was like slightly negatively charged. Most of these materials are negatively charged. And so they just repelled each other. So we added a positive charge component to it to create Dexor Plus. And that is extremely selective and effective against PFAS. And so we have two mechanisms of absorption: hydrophobic into the interior cavity, and then we have an electrostatic interaction on the head group. So the combination of these things gives us these two materials that we have today. I'm going to get into some of these things as we talk, reference size exclusion as being one of the ways that we have this great uptake and capacity. And then one of the other things in terms of green chemistries, we're really about, renewable material, that's sustainable, can be used for multiple cycles of use. And then we have a very sustainable disposal process as well. So I'll go through all that. To the question of how do you develop, the team, it was really clear to me early on that, we just didn't need to have chemists, materials chemists to do the synthesis, but, we really needed folks that could, be environmental engineers that could help us with all of the hydraulic analysis, all the things that either running it through, home filtration systems or simulating large scale systems, packed bed filtration systems. And then I knew that we needed an analytical team that could basically, increase our turnaround in the lab for all of these activities. So really strong people on mass spec, LC and GC. And so the combination of these resources, really working together allowed us to have synthesis and scale up and production. Then we have the environmental engineering team, which can do all of the hydraulic packed bed analysis for designing systems to different applications. And then we have the analytical team that's just, rapid throughput. So whether it's, giving instant feedback to the materials team to say if something's working, or if it's, assisting the engineering team on a water project that we've got somewhere, or simply just for our water test kits, which we've made commercial. So we really invested in a diverse team that, so we had expertise across all of these disciplines and, came working together. So that is how we built the team. And then, this team would be able to support, analytical, municipal, and residential filtration projects. As I mentioned, I won't spend too much time. I think, you can, if you're not familiar with PFAS, you can Google it and see that it is, really a problematic contaminant in the environment. It's, a priority at, the new EPA administration. Many states, have adopted low levels of maximum contaminant levels. It's, really, a kind of a nasty compound in terms of its persistence. So it remains in the environment for, decades, comes from things like firefighting foams, household products that were associated with kind of water resistance, like Teflon and other, clothing that were resistant. And so by virtue of that, they are, really spread throughout the country in water systems. Some geographies more than others. They tend to accumulate close to airfields or industrial activity. Also, landfill leachate tends to have a big concentration of them. So they are a big threat, and there is not any technology that is kind of cost effectively available to removing them. So that was really where we started to move our focus with the technology that we had. Some of the alternative technologies that are out there are ozonation. I won't get into huge details about it all, but essentially some of the issues there is really expensive infrastructure. It's kind of a volatile system. And then you have byproducts as well. And so some of the byproducts are worse than the precursors. You have RO, but you've got big rejection streams, plus it's expensive. Activated carbon and ion exchange are kind of the most commonly used media competitively. Activated carbon, as I mentioned, suffers from, it's extremely inexpensive. So you can use a lot of it, but you just end up having to replace it quite frequently, and it partially because it's fouling in competition with natural organic matter and other constituents in the water. Ion exchange is, focus on, an electrostatic interaction, a little more expensive, a little less effective, single use also, but those are kind of the folks that we were up against. So just our journey was, kind of making a polymer. And again, I'm mentioning we're year 5. So when we started out, the recipe we were working with was 1/8 of a gram reaction. And so it took 8 reactions to make a gram. and the yields were about 40%. And so you can see one of our early scientists here, looking at basically what we were producing and going, okay, this is going to be a long way to supplying a drinking water treatment plant. Today, we've gotten our optimizations up to really something that we can now scale from, 30-liter reactions, into, large metric ton even reactions. We haven't gone there yet. We're working with partners, but we've gone through all that optimization so that, we can now consistently and repeatedly produce the media at high yields. This was, a very involved process over the years. And so something that you guys are probably all familiar with, you just tried different combinations and experiments. We had tried different stoichiometries. We, getting the reaction temperature in your measuring yield and performance always, reaction time. And so these were all things that, you can just imagine, and this is where the analytics were super helpful, is that, you've got to, do this in a systematic way to identify the optimal combination of stoichiometry, time, temperature. Even as we scaled up, the order of addition was, important just to increase reactivity. We also, the material's exothermic, so we had, to make adjustments as we got to large scale and get heating circulators to keep the temperature consistent throughout so that it wasn't spiking during the reaction. So lots of stuff that you just learn from, experimental work and again, stuff that you guys all do. You can make the material and then you have to clean it. And, especially for drinking water treatment, after you use solvents and, reagents and things like that, you have to wash it out. And cyclodextrins love water. And so they purify very slowly. And so we easily spent 18 months working on all kinds of different methods and combinations of different solvents and water to get to again, you're always measuring it against yield and uptake. But I would tell you that purification, really has been, a kind of one of the biggest challenges, especially as we've scaled up. Some of our earlier efforts were in a single integrated system that included, we tried to do the whole thing in the same reactor. It was just, I always called it drip, 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 because there was actually no filtration flow, and it took, 3 weeks to do a batch. And then we went over, just in order to process enough material to get out to people, we went to these Buchner funnels. But again, that's not scalable because, you basically need a swimming pool to, provide sufficient quantity. So we're, it was working with a lot of different processes, learning a lot, observing a lot. We have ultimately got to a place where we were doing the reaction in one set of vessels, and then we would take, what we call the mother liquor, which is, the combination of the solid and the liquid, put it into a centrifuge here, spin off the mother liquor, then put the solid into another wash vessel, and then we just kind of go back and forth from wash vessel to centrifuge in a process. So, fortunately, there's industrial scale equipment that can allow you to kind of do this back and forth, but obviously purification is really important. Not only obviously you want a very pure material that's not leaching anything off, but the other is it will absorb better the more pure it is by not having things impacting its pores. One of the things that happened along the way, we had originally anticipated a raw materials cost of about $3.70 to make a kilogram based on estimates that came out of the original Nature paper. You can see those on the left. In And then as we kind of went to order larger scale quantities here at Cyclopure, the amount, and you can see the particular difference here between TFN was, it was costing us on a metric ton basis $272. So that just kind of blew the original formulation out of the water in terms of price. So you kind of went from 272 to 370 to 172, all of that being compared against activated carbon. So that was a big roadblock that we had to adapt to. We did have a plan B, which we were working through with a different cross-linker structure that is more readily available at a far lower cost, roughly 10%. And so we did a lot of chemistry, again, some of the same work that we had done previously with the earlier monomer to get stoichiometry right and the reaction conditions as well. So just put this all into kind of evidence that, it's, you always just have to, keep moving ahead, and there's going to be challenges that you come up against. So today, in-house, this is kind of what this wonderful media looks like. We can produce about 40 kilograms a month, and that's up from that 1/8 of a gram. We've gotten the media certified under NSF, which means that it's NSF 61, which means that it is safe to use in drinking water applications, which means it doesn't leach anything off when it's used in an absorption format. Another really important thing in media is to control the particle size. So, a powder cannot go into a pack bed system simply because, it's like having sand. It'll all have back pressure and clog. So one of the other big activities that we had to do was to figure out how to take the native powder and form granules that were stable and sturdy and could be used in water treatment. And so, we started with microcrystalline beads, but we only had 20% of our absorbent on that, so that was not as effective. We worked a little bit with alginate beads. Those were just not scalable in terms of their preparation. And then we got to this high shear granulation, which is a very efficient method for forming good, strong granules. And we have a lot of control over the different particle sizes. And, based on the application, some people may want different flow rates or different contexts. Generally for municipal activities, it's around 850 microns. But this was really an important area for us to develop, which took about a year also. One of the great things about Dexor is that we can, just like activated carbon, apply it to multiple form factors. So we can embed it in filter papers, and then those can be used. You'll see in our water test kit. These are highly absorbent, retain all the properties, the kinetics of the media. But you can do pleated filter cartridges if you want. We can also use it in a powder form, and obviously I talked to you about granular, and then we can put it into extruded block for use in refrigerator filtration, under the counter types of filtration faucet. And what was really great to see for us, because this creates lots of channels for use of the material, was that it retained its properties in each of the form factors. As I mentioned, it was really important that we invest in a state-of-the-art lab so that we could have quick turnaround on our materials development. We could process all the work that we do with collaborators on environmental projects. And so we invested in a lot of money in our LC and GC, which gives us, the ability to, see compounds down to 1 and 2 ppt. Currently, we're able to detect over 50 PFAS, down to 1 to 2 ppt concentration with all the instrument methods that have been set up. We also developed suspect screening based on algorithms and fragment libraries so that we can detect up to 2,000 PFAS in a water sample. We can't quantify. We only quantify where we've got standards, but we can identify it and show pre and post treatment to indicate removal. An example was we used a water sample up in Adrian, Michigan that was contaminated by AFFF firefighting foam. And so in our target analysis, just our regular method, we found 11 out of 35 that we could quantify for. And then on the suspect method, we found 107. So we think that'll be a great tool for demonstrating to people that, you know, you've got this number of compounds in your water and you can see how Dexor, you know, treats them pre and post, and it really give evidence to short chain as well as long chain compounds. And obviously so much of, you know, a material's promise is, you know, is kind of based on, you know, validating these types of qualifications. Along the way, you have to show a lot of things with an absorbent. We had to show kinetics and isotherms. We have very fast uptake across diverse PFAS with our media. This is a clean matrix where we show, I think there's about 22 actually in this thing that are at 1 ppb each, and with a relatively light dosing. And so that just shows kind of our ability to remove those. Then we show isotherms, which is the capacity as well. And these are all things that environmental partners are interested in. We also show the ability to use the media across different matrices. And so this is important. This is what I was showing earlier. The size exclusion allows it to perform similarly, whether it's groundwater, surface water, wastewater effluent. You can see, you know, slight decrease, but really not much. And then you can also see, you know, very little change between 5 minutes and 24 hours. So those are all things that, you know, make the material broadly applicable across different treatment applications. And I'll get into some of those. Here was just a matrix with really high PFAS levels and high dissolved organic matter as well. Again, demonstrating kind of, you know, the ability to work long chain and short chain in a complex matrix. And you can see most times we met our, you know, equilibrium point at 15 minutes. Okay, so now to some of the fun stuff. So as you know, we're bringing the media to a market. We want to find the ways to quickly get it out there, get visibility, have some impact. And so the easiest to market for us were the water test kits. We load Dexor in this extraction disc, and then we use passive sampling. So really different from any other kit. We use the media as a way to remove the contaminants, and then we reverse the process here at our labs. So we recover it through solid phase extraction and then analyze it on the mass spec. Most water kits, you know, you have to send water samples back and forth. And frankly, most cost around $500 for PFAS. We charge $80 for this round trip. So you get all the materials, shipping, receiving, and all the analytics. So it's quite a, you know, a favorable value proposition for folks. And this is kind of old. I think we're up to 400 now. We've gotten quite a bit of traction, mostly in the Northeast, Michigan. We introduced that in 2019. We have a second one coming out in the second quarter of this year, which is for pharmaceuticals. Looks like we got the names reversed here. Sorry about that. The Pharma Plus will detect for about 40 different pharmaceutical residues, pesticides, some lifestyle drugs, if anybody's interested in seeing if there's oxy or meth or other things in their drinking water. And then we are, hold on, what did I do? We're really excited about this because we're bringing our first filtration product to market in the second quarter. this will be something that is an aftermarket product that fits into a Brita filter pitcher, and it will be specifically really the first home product that'll be available for removing PFAS. This is a gravity cartridge that's got our media in granular form. So it's not an extruded block or anything, but just will, gravity flow through a pitcher. I should say again, over here, this one, we had the media loaded onto a filter paper, which we use in there to, you pass the water through 250 mil, and then you send the empty cup back to us, and then we recover it. We have a couple analytical partnerships, one with a company in Belgium that is using our media in their cartridges for groundwater detection and monitoring, really valuable for environmental firms to get in the groundwater, see how much PFAS is there, how much, if it's a plume, how it's moving. And so these folks use our material in the same way that we do in our analytics. So it's passive sampling, they pull it out, and then a lab in Antwerp does all the analytics. We're doing similar things with a student at University of Rhode Island who's in their STEEP program and using these tubes and comparing Dexor against HLB. And, we are not only far less expensive, but we are far more effective as well. And then we have an activity that we've been doing with University of Florida for monitoring as well. Large scale is an area that we're super excited about in the future. It's a longer lead time just because you have to go get qualified with folks on performance and, what systems designs and costs. You really have to get far more detailed in terms of comparing it against other media like activated carbon and ion exchange. We did a large trial in Orange County. You can see Dexor here in this column, head-to-head against activated carbon and ion exchange. And we performed very well, just exactly as we had estimated by RSSCT, which is a lab column test that you run to simulate full-scale conditions. And we have other projects, one in Tri-Town. We have one in New Jersey at Rahway. All of these are with large environmental firms. So folks like AECOM, GHD, Suez, Jacobs are all folks that we are working with on these larger collaborations. As I mentioned, we want to hit all these different points of water. So wastewater effluent is a big activity as well to prevent PFAS that come into the plant from going back out into a water resource. We have a big activity that's now entering its almost third year in Amsterdam with Vitavine and Boss. We're going into pilot, knock on wood, hopefully later this summer at a plant there under kind of the supervision of STOA, a government agency. And then here in Michigan, not that I'm in Michigan, I'm in Chicago, but there is a project, an old industrial site that is heavily contaminated. The groundwater is with PFAS, and it hasn't, all the other media have not worked, ion exchange and granular activated carbon. And so we have gone through all the preliminary tests of batch and RSSCT, and we're in the kind of final stages of design for putting in a pilot system there. So we're really excited about that. Leachate is an area where garbage juice just, because of all the stuff that gets thrown into a landfill, it all, just creates this garbage juice. And really landfill operators want to put the garbage juice back into the public sewage system. But there's a lot of sensitivity now around, putting it back in if it's got PFAS in it. So one of the big opportunities is to really strip out the PFAS from the garbage juice, the leachate, before it goes into to public sewage treatment systems. And we have a lot of partners that we're collaborating with there as well. Just some of the fun things that folks around the lab get to work on. This is our product development that we had here. This is kind of an early slide. We're actually really in the final, got all our supply chain already in place with our cartridges, and we're going on with NSF certification. But it's fun for the chemists and the team to really not only just do materials work, but to kind of see it in this prototype form.